EU leaders have this Friday been mulling over the details of the bloc's multi-billion euro recovery package, an issue which remains divisive. Well, it comes as the European Central Bank warned leaders their economies were heading for a dramatic fall following the coronavirus crisis. The European Council Chief Charles Michel saying a face-to-face summit in Brussels next month would be key to finalising details of that package and also key to clinching a deal on the EU's future relationship with Britain. Well, let's get you some more on what came out of today's virtual summit with EU leaders. France 24's Dave Keating is in Brussels. Dave, the recovery fund then is still proving a point of contention. What are the issues that the EU leaders can't agree on?
The disagreement here is really about the size and the form of this fund. Germany and France are strongly backing the European Commission's proposal for a 750 billion euro fund that would be mostly made up of grants. But the so-called Frugal Four, the Netherlands, Austria, Sweden, and Denmark, are adamantly opposed to this. They don't like the size of the fund, but they also don't like that it would be made up of grants, which don't have to be repaid by the individual EU countries. Instead, the EU as a whole would borrow this money from the international markets using the good credit of those northern European countries to help the southern European countries most affected by this crisis, whose credit isn't as good. Now they have all kinds of demands, these Frugal Four. They want maybe a rebate to their contribution to the EU budget, and they have specific demands about own resources that would be direct EU taxation to pay back these loans. At the end of the day, most EU countries support the Commission's proposal, but this needs unanimous approval. So any one of those four countries, even though they're relatively small, can block this from being adopted. The big problem here has been that they have been forced to do these negotiations over video summits over the past 4 months. Normally, these EU summits are done in person, and each national leader goes into the room alone, oftentimes without even a phone, and so that really focuses minds. The problem is now when they're doing this by video, there's lots of other people in the room with them when they're each in their national capitals, and so it's a kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. That's why Charles Michel is so desperate to have an in-person summit next month, no matter the viral situation. One EU diplomat told me if they can't go ahead with an in-person summit next month, they can pretty much forget about having this agreed by the end of July, and that's really the deadline. If this recovery fund isn't agreed by the end of July, it will not be ready in time for January 1st, the time when this new budget has to take effect, and that would mean that this money wouldn't be available for the countries who so badly need it right now.
As you say there, Dave, video conference is clearly not the best way perhaps to be carrying on these sorts of discussions. In the meantime, Brexit also came out of today. What more do we know on those negotiations?
Yeah, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave an update to the 27 prime ministers and presidents, telling them, I'm sure they already knew, that the UK has officially refused to extend the Brexit transition period. So that means that the UK is going to leave the EU single market at the end of this year. And that could cause some major economic turmoil right when countries are trying to recover from the coronavirus. So von der Leyen told the EU member states they need to start getting ready for the changes at the end of the year, because it's going to be a big change either way. Right now they're trying to negotiate a free trade agreement that would govern future EU-UK relations. But even if they can agree that, and that's a big if at this point because they only have 4 months and the talks have basically gone nowhere, even if they agree in FTA, it's still going to be a big economic shock. The question is how big this economic shock is going to be. Is it going to be a medium-sized economic shock if they can agree in FTA, or is it going to be a major economic shock if we have no deal Brexit at the end of the year? Von der Leyen telling member states, you need to start preparing now. All of the forms, all of the bureaucracy, all of the tariffs, everything that's going to be necessary for that future relationship when the UK leaves the EU for real at the end of the year. Because of course, Brexit technically took place at the end of January, but they are in a transition period right now in which they're an EU country in all but name. That we now know will end at the end of the year because the UK is opting not to extend that transition period.
All right, Dave, as you say, some complicated procedures heading towards the end of this year. For now, though, from Brussels, thank you.